So when I first started growing tomatoes, I kept hearing this thing about side shoots and picking off side shoots, and honestly, I kept looking and thinking, how do I know what's a side shoot and what's going to produce fruit? So this here is a side shoot. It's coming out from the main stem, right in the leaf axil there, and it's got leaves on the top. That's a side shoot, and you want to just pinch that out like that. See, this here on the other side is the flowers. It's also coming out from the main stem, but not so much in a leaf axil, it's just coming out. It's definitely worth checking your tomatoes pretty much daily for side shoots because they really, really love to grow. Tomatoes absolutely love to grow, and they will send out side shoots not just from the main trunk but also from the end of a leaf. Let me show you. So what we've got here is a truss of tomatoes. You can see it's coming out from the main stem. There's no leaf there, it's just the stem with the flowers that have turned into tomatoes on them. But at the end of this truss, look, it sent out a shoot. I've already cut them off once. There's leaves and there's leaves and there's a shoot there, so that needs to come off as well. Oh, I really should have brought my secateurs with me. I'll have to come back to that later. So I'm experimenting with these self-set tomatoes. I'm just letting them grow. I'm not going to stake them up. I'm not going to pinch out the side shoots. I'm just going to let them grow and see what happens. I heard somebody say on some panel show podcast I was listening to that the world record for tomatoes on one plant is about 1,000 or something ridiculous, and that was by a guy who didn't do anything to his tomatoes. He just let them grow. So we'll see what happens. Can you see this? Ooh. There it is. That's going to be my first ripe tomato, and it's growing. It's a red pear, that's what it's called. You can see why, because it looks like a red pear. And this is actually one of the very few successes I had from my early plantings, this red pear tomato. You can see it's growing really, really well actually, and I'm going to have tomatoes by mid-July. Woohoo! Do your tomatoes ever look like this? It's down to the growing conditions. So the two main causes of it are ridiculously hot and bright conditions and a lack of potassium and phosphorus in the soil. So it's a problem I've had with my tomatoes last year and this year. I mean, who'd have thought it in West Wales, too hot and bright. And that the truss for this tomato set quite early on, because this is from my red pear, which I've been growing since January. So these tomatoes actually set during that really, really hot and sunny weather. See, down here is one of my later tomatoes, and if you look at it, it's ripening really evenly all over. All that points to the fact that it's more down to the weather than the soil, because these Roma tomatoes were much later grown, and those trusses would have set once the weather had cooled off, and we're now in some sort of like mid-July autumn in Wales, but there you go. Here's a good reason to keep a very close eye on your tomatoes as you're growing them, not just to pull out the side shoots, but can you see that? Judging by the slug trails I found on the surrounding leaves, that's slug damage, and I thought these were ripening really nicely, and all the while they're getting eaten. Never mind, we got plenty. Look, we can spare a few for the critters. So I'm just going to throw these manky munch tomatoes in the compost bin, and I will definitely get some self-set tomatoes next year. Who knows where. Can you see this down here? This is just one tomato plant, and that's what happens when you don't stake them or pinch out the side shoots. They grow into a massive sprawly bush, and I haven't got a single tomato on any of them yet, but there are lots of flowers, so I suspect what we'll get is millions of marble-sized tomatoes. So there's a rather weedy looking tomato plant surrounded by strawberries that are almost as tall as it. Here's another tomato plant that's really struggling. It looks like it needs a good feed. I guess tomatoes are really hungry. I mean, compare those weedy looking specimens with this beast behind me. No, not that beast. Not this beast. The tomato plant. It's big, it's stocky, it's not surrounded by strawberries. Now, I had previously said I was going to leave these self-set tomatoes, see what happens, see how many tomatoes I can get, but I can't do it. I just can't do it. They are swamping my new peach tree. They're also swamping a sweet pepper and a spinach plant. And to be honest, I've got plenty of tomatoes. That's better. Much more room to grow. I drew my head in. I planted way too many. We redid the polytunnel this winter so that it would have a garden feel. We've got these lovely wiggly paths and beautifully edged beds, and now the strawberries are just taking over and making it look like an utter mess. I can't cope with it. I've got to do something now. I have seen strawberries make really good ground cover in other polytunnels. I think the difference with mine was that when I planted them it got really hot and really sunny, and I watered them really well, so they put on lots and lots of vegetative growth and got really big and started to swamp everything around them. This right here is one of the reasons I think that is because I've taken some of the runners and I've planted them outside, and since I've done that it's been quite chilly and cold, and you can see all the really leggy old growth that it put on in the polytunnel. You see that? Hang on. Compared to the short stout new growth that it's put on in the colder weather outside. So strawberries really benefit from a bit of cold weather. It just goes to show that, you know, gardening is it's a season by season thing. You have to respond to whatever the weather's doing at the time. So I was originally just going to let them root where they fall and then dig them up and plant them all in the food forest. But that was a couple of weeks ago, and it's become quite clear that if I do that, I'm going to have a very overgrown polytunnel which I can't manage. I drew my head in. So I've dug up just 2 forkfuls of, well actually I've dug up 2 basic rosettes of strawberries, and I've got about 1 million runners. With a bucket full of runners and a crate which I'm sorting them into. So I'm desperately trying to reduce my reliance on bought-in compost. So these, as you can see, they're not quite rooted yet, but I'm chopping off all the excess, throwing them in the crate, and then I'm going to put them in water until they root, and then I'm going to sell them as rooted runners, bare root. So no need for shop bought compost whatsoever. So if anybody wants any rooted strawberry runners which you'd plant now for fruit next year, check out the link in the show notes. I've always wanted to say that.